All right, let's dive right in. What if I told you that the real reason for so many modern health issues, everything from chronic fatigue to even cancer, isn't just bad genes or a bad luck, but a hidden enemy living inside of you? We're about to unpack some source material that makes a pretty startling claim. There's a silent war going on inside our bodies, and parasites are the unrecognized enemy. So let's get into this really controversial perspective. And right off the bat, the source material just drops this bombshell. It's a huge claim, right? The idea here is that for decades, we've been looking in all the wrong places, that these widespread modern illnesses aren't random at all, but are actually caused by parasitic infections that almost nobody is looking for. This is the absolute core idea we're going to be digging into today. Okay, so first things first, let's look at how these sources actually define the problem. They paint this picture of a silent epidemic. The idea is that these little invaders are so common and their symptoms are so cleverly disguised as everyday ailments that most of us could be walking around with them for years and have absolutely no idea. Now, take a look at this list. Persistent digestive issues, chronic fatigue, skin problems, brain fog. Does any of this sound familiar? What's so wild is just how, normal these symptoms seem. And according to the source, that's the whole trick. These are the kinds of things we all tend to just brush off or get diagnosed as something else, while the real root cause, these alleged parasites, gets to stay hidden in plain sight. And this quote from Dr. Brian Ardis, it really just cuts right to the chase, doesn't it? The perspective here is a direct challenge to so many common diagnoses. It's basically saying that all these different digestive disorders we hear about, they aren't actually separate diseases. Instead, they're just different symptoms of the exact same problem, parasites. So, okay, if we accept the premise for a minute that parasites are this huge, hidden problem, the next logical question is, how? How could these things possibly cause so much damage? This is where the source material gets into the nitty-gritty, explaining the playbook these so-called architects of disease use to wreck our health from the inside. So who are the main suspects in this story? Well, they're broken down into three main groups. You've got your protozoa, which are these tiny, microscopic, single-celled guys. Then you have the helminths. These are the bigger ones, the worms that can set up shop in your gut and organs. And finally, the ectoparasites, which are the ones that hang out on the outside, on your skin. And according to this view, these things are not just passive hitchhikers. Oh no, they launch a full-scale, multi-front attack. Think about it. They're accused of literally stealing your food, your essential vitamins and minerals. They release their own toxic waste into your system, which creates inflammation, and they even physically damage your tissues. The narrative here is that they're true masters of sabotage, systematically weakening their host. And all of that, it leads to what the source calls the absolute core of the problem: chronic inflammation. Imagine your body's alarm system just being on 24/7 because these invaders are always there. That constant state of emergency creates this low-grade, simmering inflammation throughout your body. And that inflammation, that's pointed to as the main bridge, the thing that turns a simple parasitic infection into a serious, long-term chronic disease. And when you see the list of diseases that this constant inflammation is supposedly linked to, wow, it's a heavy one. We're talking about major autoimmune disorders like rheumatoid arthritis and lupus, serious neurological issues, even cardiovascular conditions and some cancers. This perspective draws a direct line from a long-term parasitic infection to some of the biggest, scariest health challenges out there. All right, now we're about to get into what is, without a doubt, the most controversial part of this whole narrative. The source material makes some really bold connections between parasites, COVID-19, and the vaccines. Just to be clear, we're simply going to lay out these arguments exactly as they're presented. So the source basically throws this question on the table. What if COVID-19 isn't what we were told it was? What if it's actually a parasitic infection? It's a shocking idea. And from there, the text starts to build a case that the illness itself is, at its core, parasitic. And this quote from Nicole Pavlik, a registered nurse, really crystallizes that argument. The logic presented here is pretty straightforward. Think about the drugs that were being talked about as possible treatments, like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. Well, what are they? They're antiparasitic drugs. So the thinking goes, if you use anti-parasite medicine to treat it, it must be a parasite. Then we have this theory from Dr. Lee Merritt. The claim here is twofold. First, that the vaccines weaken the specific part of your immune system that's in charge of keeping parasites under control. And second, she links this to those reports of cardiac events in athletes. She specifically points to a parasite called Trypanosoma cruzi, which causes Chagas disease, and suggests that these vaccines are basically letting this dormant parasite run wild, leading to heart problems. Okay, so after laying out this pretty bleak picture, the focus naturally shifts to, well, what do you do about it? And the sources provide a whole arsenal of solutions, a mix of both natural remedies and specific pharmaceutical protocols, all aimed at clearing these alleged invaders out of your system. The first line of defense, according to this view, is nature's pharmacy. We see a lot of herbs that have been used for, well, centuries in traditional medicine. Things like wormwood, cloves, black walnut hull. These are consistently pointed to as powerful, natural weapons you can use in this fight. But it's not just about herbs. There's also a very specific drug protocol that's laid out. It's kind of a 1-2 punch strategy. You use one drug, mebendazole, to essentially starve the parasites by cutting off their food supply. Then you use another one, pyrantel to paralyze them. What's really interesting, though, are the very specific warnings they give, like, do not take this with that, highlighting how precise this protocol is supposed to be. And this all gets wrapped up into a really intensive plan called Protocol P. And believe me, it's a marathon, not a sprint. It's a multi-month thing. It combines those medications we just talked about with a few other key elements. It uses something called binders, like diatomaceous earth, which is described as being like microscopic razors that shred the parasites. Then it uses purgatives, like castor oil, which, well, it's a powerful laxative meant to flush everything out fast. And the whole time, you're using herbs and enemas to help your body handle what's described as a really intense cleansing process. All right, so let's say you go through this whole intense protocol. You've cleaned house, so to speak. Now what? How do you keep the invaders from coming back? That brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, the prevention plan for staying healthy long-term. And the advice for prevention is really all about making your body a place where parasites just don't want to live. The big things are cutting out sugar and processed foods, which are basically seen as parasite superfoods, and upping your intake of fiber to keep things moving. Then you add in preventative foods like raw garlic, pumpkin seeds, and sauerkraut to really fortify your defenses. So when you boil it all down, the core message from this source material is pretty clear. This isn't about finding a magic bullet or a quick fix. The argument is that if you truly want to reclaim your health from these hidden invaders, it takes a complete, holistic approach. You have to combine the intense cleansing with major changes to your diet and your overall lifestyle for the long haul. Which brings us right back to the massive question we started with. Are these invisible invaders really the true architects of so much of our modern illness? It's a challenging, provocative idea for sure. We've walked through the claims, the alleged mechanisms, and the proposed solutions. And now that central question is left for you to think about.